Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are going to talk about what brought the United States into World War II, as well as the internment of Japanese Americans. Okay, you can take these down in your notebooks. You can make them into a Google Doc, whichever you prefer. Okay, so from neutrality to war. First and foremost, we talk about how the United States was an isolationist country, and we go all the way back to 1935. When Italy was going to invade Ethiopia, and we established the Neutrality Act of 1935 that said we are placing an embargo. An embargo is when you don't trade to other countries against both sides, and warned American citizens traveling on ships, if you get in trouble, this is on you. We've already played this game with World War I. We're not getting into this again. So, President FDR at this point in time says, all right, well, we know that most people are going to side with Britain, France, and other allied nations because that's who we were with before. But if we are going to help these people out, what are we going to do to assist them? We are tested with neutrality in September of 1939 when the war actually begins, and we started to lift the arms embargo for nations at war because just like Uncle Sam's looking here at this picture, well, we could probably make some money if we sold some arms to these nations, although ships still were not permitted to enter war zones. So the first thing that we do is about 6 to 8 months after the war is going through, President Roosevelt says, well, why don't we give the British 50 American destroyers, and we'll take a base in the Caribbean, ends up being in Cuba, and boom, $1 billion. This keeps happening. I'm really sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, thank you. Got it. Awesome. Thank you. Cool. Got it. Awesome. Yeah, I don't know. It keeps happening, and I've tried disabling it and all these things, but whatever. We give $1 billion to the British in this aid. But you see how we're talking about all of these things that we want to do and looking great and everything, but you still got some work to do out here, okay? We officially banned neutrality when we begin the Lend-Lease system when Great Britain was bankrupt, and we could funnel weapons into England on the premise that they would return them when the war is over. Okay, I don't know about you guys, but I do know that you cannot reuse a bullet once you shoot it. You cannot reuse a grenade once it explodes. So this is our idea that we can help out Great Britain because they're going to give everything back to us. In the Atlantic, we are chilling as far as Iceland. Iceland is the highlighted red country right here. And wasn't it earlier that I said that ships were not allowed in these warring regions? But the Western Atlantic was technically a neutral zone and a responsibility for America to protect. We extend the Lend-Lease premise to the Soviet Union after Hitler, spoiler alert, attacks Russia and creates a second front of the war because he'd already conquered, France and so many regions of Europe. And we extend the Lend-Lease to the Soviets and hand out billions and billions and billions of dollars in weapons. So you look at all these billions over here, 9.3 billion, 5.9 billion. It does greatly help our economy, though. Nazi submarines start to torpedo American vessels that are surprisingly near Iceland, and FDR orders to sink these submarines on quote-unquote sight, and now we could arm our merchant vessels and go into whatever ports we want to, whether they be friendly, belligerent, dangerous, whatever. The Atlantic Charter is signed off the coast of Newfoundland in where President Roosevelt meets with Winston Churchill, who's the Prime Minister of Great Britain. And they outline this whole idea where there's no military commitments but a charter, which is a fancy piece of paper, basically, to have common principles and a better future for the world and call for the final destruction of Nazi tyranny. So there's no military commitment, but they're outlining that they want to help each other. Japan is extending their empire in the Pacific, and they signed an ally with Germany and Italy, and they start to move into Indochina, which is present-day Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and they take over Vietnam, which is a colony of France. France is not like that. So the United States freezes Japanese assets in the United States, and FDR runs this, and people get pretty upset. So they are not allowing them to, transfer any sort of money or anything that they would want. And Congress allows the president to restrict sale of strategic war materials like scrap iron, airplane fuel to other countries for Japan. At 7:55 on a Sunday, which a lot of people point out because most people were resting, on December 7th, 1941, a wave of Japanese bombers attacked the United States naval base in Pearl Harbor, killing more than 2,400 soldiers, and another 1,000 were injured. The United States declares war on Japan one day later. Germany and Italy declare war on the United States, and Congress passes without a Congress reciprocates without a dissenting vote, which is very rare, meaning every single person in Congress was able to say, yes, we want to go to war. Following the attacks, don't worry about that, on Pearl Harbor, we see one of the black spots in American history, which is the internment of Japanese Americans. Unlike World War I, the popular animosity was not felt towards the Germans, but in considerable amounts towards the Japanese. Okay. Basically, these racial slurs and caricatures of Japanese people were made by government propaganda and pop culture to openly hate Japanese people. And they were devious, malign, savage, evil, all of these things. With that point in time, there were approximately 127,000 Japanese Americans in the United States, a lot living in California, immigrating through Star Island near San Francisco. There's the Issei, which is the first generation immigrants, meaning they were born in Japan, came to the United States, and the Nisei, which are naturalized or native born citizens, meaning these people are United States citizens. They were either brought in as naturalization, which is completely legal, or they were actually born here and just have Japanese descent. A lot of people were afraid that these Japanese Americans were co-conspirators with Japan, and they were going to work together to bring the United States down, from the inside. They mostly kept to themselves, continued Japanese culture. Go figure that if you've done something for your entire life, or your parents have, you'll probably continue that as well. February of 1942, the president authorized the army to intern Japanese Americans. And this is pressure from the military officials and political leaders on the West Coast. And more than 100,000 people were rounded up, told to get rid of all of your things, go to these relocation centers located in the western mountains of California. And these facilities are similar to prisons. I mean, you got barbed wire here, you got fences, things of the like. They were forced to spend up to 3 years in these isolated areas, couldn't really make a lot of money or lucrative employment, had very limited medical care as well, and deprived of any sort of decent schooling for children. It was not found to be unconstitutional, where there was a Supreme Court case, which was Korematsu versus the United States, and this evacuation was upheld. And a lot of people were unable to get any sort of compensation for their losses until Congress acted during the Reagan administration in the 1980s. And even so, it's not really fair that you were uplifted, taken out of your home, and told to do whatever the United States tells you to do. Okay. There is this YouTube video. It is posted on Classroom. Please watch it as part of the assignment. If you have any questions on Japanese internment, this is document 1. It is a film strip. This is a propaganda film that the United States government produced in 1943. If you have any questions, shoot me an email and let me know. Other than that, enjoy the rest of your week.